Why is it that whenever Africa tries to stand up, the West suddenly comes up with a problem? Whenever Africa tries to take charge and ownership of its own resources, the West comes up with pressure, sabotage, sanctions. And right now, the battle is for oil, with the richest man in Africa's $20 billion refinery, that's Aliko Dangote, in the middle of it. A project that should be celebrated worldwide. But right now is under attack. Why? Because they do not want Africa to win. They do not want us to take charge of our resources. They want us to be subservient, to always give them what is ours. Well, let's get into the story. Now, let's start with the basics. Nigeria is Africa's biggest oil producer. Millions of barrels are pumped from the ground. But here's the madness. Nigeria still imports 80% of fuel. And why? Because for decades, Nigeria's local refineries were crippled. Now, Aliko Dangote came to the scene with his largest single-train refinery in the world that can process 650,000 barrels of oil per day, enough to supply to Nigerians and even exports. But we still have problem in Nigeria. Now, here's where the West comes in. Instead of supporting this good initiative that this man is doing in Africa, guess what? They blocked it. Why would they block it? They don't want the good of Nigeria. They don't want the good of Africa. So why would they support it? Why will our colonizers support a good thing that will help us? Of course, we're not expecting them to stand by us, stand with us, or stand for the Aliko Dangote refinery. And how did they do this? They pressured Nigerian government not to supply crude oil to Dangote. I mean, it was war. A serious war between Dangote and the Nigerian government. They pushed foreign fuel imports into Africa at cheap rates to undercut Dangote even before it gets off the ground. That's not competition, family. That's sabotage. They know what they are doing. And let's be clear, Western foreign companies like Shell, Total, Chevron have made billions from Nigeria's crude oil for decades. But once Nigerians build something that would break their monopoly, it becomes a problem. Something that will help Nigeria, made by Nigerians, it becomes a problem. Now, Nigeria spent $23 billion in importing fuel in 2022, but Dangote refinery is here. It could cut that, it too. Even the African Union has called the refinery a game changer. Ghana, Ivory Coast, other West African countries are lining up to get the Dangote fuel. But what's the West painting? What they're trying to paint now is that the Dangote refinery is trying to monopolize that sector. When they were in this, they were enjoying it. But all of a sudden, it came to this man's turn, who is an African. It becomes a monopoly. When they dominated the market, it was okay. There was no complaint whatsoever. But our own person, African, is trying to do well, do right for his people. It becomes a problem. It becomes the word monopoly. Imagine. And let's not forget this government is also in the middle. On one hand, they support the local refineries. On the other hand, they are bowing down to the IMF and to the Western pressure. Let's not forget that. In fact, there are reports that some officials are deliberately slowing down Dangote's approval, forcing him to export abroad before selling to Nigerians. That's export fuel abroad before even selling to Nigerians. Who is our government working for? Nigerians or the West? I know we know the answer already.
Showed that in February and March last year, the US exported more crude oil to Nigeria than it imported. US crude exports to Nigeria were 111,000 barrels per day in February and 169,000 barrels per day in March. While the US crude imports from Nigeria just over 54,000 barrels in February and 72,000 barrels per day in March. The shift was driven by two factors: a slowdown in US demand due to the refinery maintenance issues, and a surge in crude requirements from Nigeria's newly operational Dangote refinery.
Let's break this down. Why are they so scared of Dangote's success? Why are they so scared? What is the problem? It's simple. If Africa refines its own oil, it's going to cause problem for them. It's less dependence on European imports and less control for Washington. Africa gets to set the price. Africa gets to set the standard and not the other way around. And they don't want that. So they keep on opposing this man with all they've got. They don't want that. If Dangote wins, imagine South Africa, Angola, Namibia, Tanzania, other African countries building their own major refineries. It means independence. It spells independence for Africa. And they don't want that. They just want to be in control all the time. That's their plan. They don't want us to be independent, indeed. Well, people, this isn't about the Dangote refinery. It's about a pattern. They do not want Africans to win. Look at what happened to Gaddafi when he tried to create the gold-backed currency. Look at Congo, where the leaders tried to control the cobalt or the coltan. What happened? Sudden unrest. And cool. And now it's Africa's turn. What they're saying is, you can pump the fuel, but you cannot control it. But this isn't about Dangote, because if he loses, the cycle of dependency continues. And they're not afraid of Dangote, right? They're afraid of Africa's independence. They're afraid of Africa's voice. They're afraid of Africa standing against them. What do you have to say about this story? Comment your thoughts and do not forget to share, like, subscribe, and turn on your notification button. My name is Lynient Akotonou.